Hi, I'm Tom Burgess, and you're listening to The Real Agenda, and this is our weekly wake-up show. And today, we're going to be talking about diversity, how Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups, that's BAME, which also happens to be a village in China and a football club in Liberia, where the president is the former Chelsea and Manchester City footballer, George Weah. Anyway, BAME is underrepresented in the finance sector. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the hidden homeless, the huge numbers in temporary accommodation, and the tragedy of child poverty, as well as an EU update. And we might even mention the lack of leadership election that's going on, where a small number of voters get to choose the next Prime Minister. Heaven help us. So let's first introduce the team. Satya, how are you doing? You've always got a great smile, and thanks for bringing the biscuits.
You're very welcome, Tom. Hi, it's nice to be here. I'm going to be talking about child poverty today. There's a new report that's out, so we'll talk about that a bit later.
Okay, thank you. And Hugh, our man from Brussels, he's going to give us an update on what's going on in the EU later, is that right?
Hi Tom, yeah, that's right.
And remind us of your connection with Brussels. Now, we say our man from Brussels, but I know you're in the UK now, but...
I'm born and raised in Brussels, Tom.
There you go, so you know everything about it.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I know a fair bit.
Good, well, and you really follow the EU and what's going on there, right?
Absolutely.
So you're going to tell us. But first of all, we welcome for the first time Oliver Williams. Welcome, Oliver. It's good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad, Tom. Thank you.
Not too bad. I hope you're doing terrifically. Were you interested? Thanks very much for coming along. Why are you interested in the Real Agenda?
For me, it's quite simple. Real Agenda highlights key issues that today's society needs to deal with, but also they're about action and about solutions.
You're doing some work on diversity, and you're doing some mentoring work in addition to what your real job is.
That's correct. So
tell us a bit about that.
So basically, I've been doing a lot of mentoring work for the last 15 years, sort of mentoring young Afro-Caribbean, sort of underprivileged individuals in the schools and trying to help them gain access to the finance community and just giving them the tools and the knowledge to sort of write applications, do their CVs. But at one of my last workplaces, State Street, I was developing the narrative for all our senior executives in terms of their diversity and inclusion messaging, and that's how I sort of got into the diversity and inclusion angle in quite a big way.
Are you still doing some of that work?
I am. Well, at my current company, I'm still working in the financial sector generally. So at my current company, I'm actually helping the embryonic diversity and inclusion committee get off the ground, and it's quite a challenge because it's quite new for them. But I'm sort of introducing them to some external people that I know who do work around the unconscious bias and training for senior executives.
But I think you also had a report that recently came out that you also wanted to tell us about. So tell us about that, Oliver.
Yeah, so basically the Investment Association, which is the association for the investment management industry, it highlights in its report steps firms could take to create more diverse, inclusive workforces. Now, just sort of some of the key stats from it, which I am going to read out. The report found that less than 1% of managers, investment managers that is, are black, even though from this ethnic background make up 3% of the UK population and more than 13% of London. So to me, those stats alone are, bring home the sort of the imbalances in our country as it stands today. And those are some of the sort of issues that I want us to highlight and actually find solutions for.
I know that the finance sector is quite bad, actually, Oliver, on these issues, but it's not alone. There's so many other areas, so many other different sectors that are just as bad, particularly when you get to middle to senior management.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe that's the key. It's actually in sort of outside the finance work that sort of, to hit the nail on the head, the senior managers, as the higher you get up, I think the more challenging it becomes in terms of the lack of diversity. I think there's also some work I did at State Street where access to entry for sort of Afro-Caribbean people is fine, you can get them in, but once it's actually getting up the ladder where they sort of remain at the same level, which is a problem.
Yeah, it's a big, big problem. And we've been at this for 30 years and it's still, we're still talking about it. Some people say, should we have targets for this? Should we have legal targets where organisations have to have, so many women or so many black people in different positions within organisations? And lots of people actually say, no, we don't want to have targets because they can be very false. And also there'll be a backlash to that. I'm one of those people who believes that actually, unless we do have targets, it's not going to move very quickly. And even if we do it for, say, have targets for 5 years and then take them away, I think some movement has to come, because at the moment it's not.
I'm sort of on the fence with targets at the moment, actually. I do appreciate, understand we need to have targets. And I think particularly if you want to move and make a difference, straight away, because this is, people say it's a long-term thing. But how long is long-term, as you say, Satya? I mean, this has been going on for 30 years. And the needle hasn't really moved as such. So in order to move that needle significantly, I think targets are probably the right way to go.
Okay, well, we'll no doubt come back to that at some other time.
Fascinating area.
What was the name of the report again, Oliver?
The report's called Black Voices, Building Black Representation in Investment Management.
Okay, well, we hope you will be back on another show with us, and you might be a regular feature of the Weekly Wake Up.
I hope so.
Oh, good. We'll let you in. Let's move on before we go to Hugh. But I'm just going to give you a bit of an update of what's been going on. In fact, I did do a TV interview the other day for RT News, which is Russia Today, which was quite an interesting thing. I was called in to talk about the tax haven report that came out. We're actually now being broadcast on broadcast radio.
Ooh.
So there you go. Our episodes are going out now on a new radio station. It isn't officially launched, but they are actually broadcasting at the moment because they're trialling it to be launched in September. So we'll tell you more about that. And they've taken all the Real Agenda podcasts, and the weekly Wake Up will also be going out on Saturday morning on that station. So that should be fun. Also, I went to an event organised by the Fair Tax Mark. Now, the Fair Tax, this was their reception they did at the House of Commons. The Fair Tax Mark gives accreditation to companies who pay their tax fairly.
That sounds like a really good idea to me, because I think they shouldn't need an incentive to pay their tax fairly, but some companies may need that. And
well, what they found, what the companies that have gone through it, they found it's really helped with their sort of reputation and with customers, which all sounds good. And there's a Fair Tax Week is coming up.
Tom, sorry to interrupt.
Don't need to apologise to interrupt. I'm glad you've got something to say, Hugh. Go on, carry on.
I don't know. Did you hear about the UK tax havens? So they're now going to have to reveal company ownership.
Absolutely.
So you heard about that. I think it was revealed this week that Guernsey and tax havens like that are going to have to be very much more open about who are the final beneficiaries of the money that...
It's a can of worms.
It is a can of worms. Is it true that the UK has the most tax havens in the world?
Yeah.
Well, it does in the sense that all their dependencies, so on the scale of tax havens in the world, if you put the UK and its dependencies, the largest tax haven, so that's where people are shifting money.
So there may be lots and lots of people that actually should be paying their taxes here in the UK, actually going overseas. And,
they're shifting money overseas.
Shifting their money over there, and we're not getting the benefit.
And we all lose out. We all know that the tax system is a mess. That's the way it is. People have got to pay it. Billions goes overseas.
I've just Googled top European tax havens. So England is the first in Europe, followed by Germany, followed by Ireland, believe it or not.
Wow.
Well, I think if you take it internationally, and the Tax Justice Network has actually done a report on this, and that was in fact the very thing that I was talking to the RT television about. But it's certainly the UK and its dependencies are one of the worst. But the whole concept of this is there has been a shift. And actually one of the things that Margaret Hodge, who used to be running the Public Accounts Committee at the MP, said yesterday when she was speaking, she felt there has been a shift. It used to be cool to avoid tax, and now it's less cool. Still going on.
What makes it more acute is that when you see the 1% of the wealthy are getting richer, that's and people are doing that at the same time, and poor people are getting poorer, it makes it more acute that people have been squeezed at the bottom, and then these people are actually, they're avoiding taxpayer corporations to create a less fair society, essentially, at the end of the day.
Well, that's absolutely the point, because people say, well, why does it matter? But it does matter, because there's less money going into the exchequer, and therefore there's not enough money to pay for the public services. And, we all create the wealth. We all create it, but it's accumulated by a few, so we need to find a way.
It's really alarming, isn't it? Because You know, we have problems with the NHS. We have so many people living in poverty in this country, and yet we could solve it very, very quickly and very easily.
Well, we could, and if we taxed wealth more and income less to solve homelessness, crisis. There's homelessness charities said it would cost 19 billion and we'd solve homelessness, and it would give 50 billion in benefits. It's not just the financial; it's just people have better lives, but we choose not to do it.
And it's all about political will at the end of the day.
It's political will in the UK first and foremost, but it's also political will in Europe. I mean, when you look at Jean-Claude Juncker, who used to be Prime Minister of Luxembourg, he was absolutely against any type of reform when it came to tax havens. And now that he was European Commissioner, all of a sudden he wants to stop tax havens. Yes, I mean, it needs to be done at a European level as well. Let's not forget that, because it's all good, the UK doing their bit, but then all that money is just going to go to second country, Germany. Okay, great. That's a loss for the UK all of a sudden. So it's about having your voice at the table inside the EU if we really want to make a change.
Very good point, actually. Very good point.
Indeed it is. Another thing that I just wanted to mention here, which I think is important, and it's a good work being done by my friend and colleague, Reverend Paul Nicholson, at Taxpayers Against Poverty. There's thousands upon thousands of people that are in temporary accommodation, and they get constantly moved around. And Reverend Paul Nicholson lives in Haringey, and he's been supporting several groups there, and also did a representation to the Haringey Housing and Regeneration Committee, took a delegation in there. And one of just some of the figures that are talked about here, and 82,300 homeless families with 123,000 children in temporary accommodation in England, of which 56,000 families, or 69%, are in London, and 3,000 of those London families are in Haringey, with 5,000 children under 18. Now, and the issue with temporary accommodation is obviously that it's temporary. So this is proving to be a big issue. It's always been a big issue. There needs to be some pretty decisive action. Anyone got any thoughts on that?
It's just devastating, isn't it? When, if you're in temporary accommodation and you keep getting moved on, the children, their lives are disrupted, schooling's disrupted, no stability. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
A lot of it comes down to land. Part of the statement that Reverend Paul did was that land is being torn by the wealthy under the homes of council tenants, and the leaseholders and freeholders compulsory purchase in what's called regeneration. So under the name of regeneration, this sort of thing is happening. People's homes are being taken away. Now, we all want it all to be improved, but it's very difficult if you can't even afford the housing, and it pushes the price of land up, which pushes the price of houses. Related to that, there's a report for Land for the Many, which was edited by George Monbiot, who writes for The Guardian, amongst other things, and he calls it the most neglected issue in British politics, and it's causing soaring inequality, and that since 1995, land values in the country have risen by 412%.
But a lot of it, I heard, was like when people from abroad come and buy housing here. And a lot of the houses, you get the Russians, you get people from India, you get people from China come and buy properties, particularly in London, but then broadening themselves out now to other areas as well. So that pushes prices up of housing. The people who are actually local cannot afford homes in their areas.
Well, it's getting worse. 20 years ago, the average working family needed to save for 3 years to afford a deposit on the house. Today, they must save for 19 years. And life is even worse for renters, because while housing costs swallow 12% of the average household income for those who have mortgages, for renters it's 36%. Now, this can be solved by changing the property tax system, which is one of the things included in this report, which would be based on land values, and also making more land available for public use, so that then build houses on that. You don't need to build houses on the publicly owned land, which means then, the people who are buying it are not paying for the land element, they're paying for the housing element. So there are things that can be done. Our man from Brussels is going to give us an update on EU elections and what's happening. Over to you, Hugh.
Thanks, Tom. We've just had the European elections. Very exciting, I'm sure you'll agree.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, yes, very exciting.
Everyone's voted, right? Everyone?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. I just wanted to have a little look and inform myself a little bit further on what the overall turnout in Europe was. What are the key things that happened? Because we're not really hearing about it anymore. It's all about the leadership.
So tell us
elections,
about
aren't
it, go.
So in essence, so European turnout was highest in 20 years. 51% overall in Europe voted. Green parties performed well and said there's a green wave. In France, Germany and Ireland, Green parties saw huge increases. The balance of power will change as traditional parties only held onto top spots by a very slim margin. The EPP, European People's Party, will hold onto the majority with a projected, with about 179 seats, down from 221 seats.
So what does this mean for us in the UK then?
So I'm getting onto that.
Okay, well, we're
This is
making
my
the
next
assumption
point.
we're staying in the European Union, and I'm just a bit worried about these people from the Brexit party that have managed to get into the European Union. I want to know what you're going to do about it.
Okay, well,
Sorry, into
What are
European
you going to
Parliament.
do about it? Hugh?
European Parliament.
Well, Tom, I'm really sorry, but my next words are going to be, your ears are going to, it's going to be horrible. Nigel Farage.
So that's a band name.
It's a band name around here, but I can't really escape it talking
There are
about
two
this.
names that are not allowed to mention on this, but we won't say which the other one is. Keep going.
Oh, I want to know now. I want to know.
So, Brexit Party stormed the UK vote with over 31%, but pro-European Liberal Democrats also surged in popularity, as we all know. The election saw a big loss for the Conservatives and Labour Party, as we all know. General elections normally get a turnout of at least 60%, and the EU referendum had a turnout of 72%, whereas turnout in the UK saw 37%. This means the voters may not be representative of the actual entire electorate. So that's something to remember. That's my point on the UK.
The Brexit party, with such a large membership of the European Parliament, are there any more thoughts or discussions on what they're going to do? Because one of the things the European Union is concerned about is that they might disrupt things.
They are obviously going to be disrupting things.
I should hope not. I'd hope they'd actually be a bit more polite and organised about that, but maybe that's being a bit hopeful.
Well, they're not pro-EU, so they are going to be disruptive in the very nature of who they are.
Yeah.
They want to get out of the EU.
But let's not forget that there's been a surge in right-wing politics across Europe. So Italy saw a massive increase. France, Marine Le Pen. Hungary, Austria with their far-right president.
Austria's got their own problems, hasn't he? The finance minister.
Okay, so let's move on a bit from that. So we've certainly got issues with that, and hopefully we're not going to leave the European Union. There has been a leadership election, as I would like to refer to it, as a lack of leadership and direction. And my colleagues here are starting to fall asleep and walk out of the room.
Order.
So maybe we shouldn't talk about it, because we don't usually talk about partisans' activities. But unless anyone's got a quick comment, we'll move on.
Other ones.
Yeah, on a serious note, though, it's going to be really important, whoever the new leader is, in terms of our agenda, i.e. the real agenda. Is any of them going to do anything about the burning injustices that the Tories keep talking about but never do anything about, which they can very easily, very quickly, but they just won't do it.
And I think that's the key point, Satya. You know, what we've seen about this election, and indeed for that matter the European elections, but they're not the Tory leadership elections. These issues, in my view, have not been discussed.
Absolutely.
Or they've been touched on. They've been talking about general stuff. There's been nothing specific that actually affect the people of this country, and the majority of the people of this country, including the 14 million in poverty. What you see there on the television is politics for the privileged, and they're playing games, and we've got to get past that, and we need more compassion and courage in politics, and that's what we're going to.
They're not saying anything that's worthwhile listening to for the majority of the people in this country. The only thing that has been said is tax cuts for the rich.
I mean, for me, whatever hope the Conservatives had of staying in power, for me, is fading.
I think the key for me actually is coming back to those people on the panel represent. They don't represent the real agenda people we're trying to address, as Satya and Tom were saying. I think, to me, if you look at them, and this could be biased, a bunch of privileged people themselves who, to me, don't have any real connection with the society, the mass society they're looking to, although they don't need to because they're appealing to their party members, I guess.
Okay. Well, this programme set out not to be a gossip shop.
But we love gossiping.
We're focused on the real agenda. And before we go, we had a very important issue. So it's over to you, Satya. Let's talk about what you want to talk about.
I wanted to talk about this report that's come out on child poverty, and it was brought out by a group called the End Child Poverty Coalition, and this is a coalition that's made up of about 100 organisations from different sections of civic society, and it includes children's charities, child welfare organisations, social justice groups, faith groups and trade unions. And they have a vision, which I think is a fantastic vision, which says that they want a UK free of child poverty. Now, what do you guys think about that? Having a UK free of child poverty?
No, I was just going to say, I think that's an absolutely brilliant idea. I think that will go some way to addressing what many call burning injustices in our society, if we can say that. Eliminating child poverty is the route to giving kids educational opportunities, dealing with our inequalities. I mean, the list is endless.
Yeah, given that we have, according to this report, 4.1 million children living in poverty in the UK, which I think is quite alarming. And it's just totally unacceptable. And what the coalition has done, they've brought out a report which maps out where the highest levels of child poverty are. And what they found is that, obviously, I think it's sort of almost, we would know this, is that the highest levels are in the larger cities, London, Birmingham, Manchester. But they have broken it down into constituencies and into Labour wards. And I can actually say...
Does the report say anything about sort of solutions for eliminating the poverty?
Yes, it does. I was just going to say that, places like Tower Hamlets, Manchester, Newham, Birmingham, Hackney, Haringey, which Tom mentioned earlier, and others have over 50% of the children in those areas living in poverty.
It's quite interesting. Some of these areas that you mentioned, like Tower Hamlets, is right next to the City of London, which is a hub of sort of many rich incomes as such, and they could do a lot more to actually solve that problem.
Absolutely. And in terms of solutions, there are obviously a number of things. And one of those is having minimum income standards. So we've got things like the Living Wage Foundation, which puts forward a living wage, but we should also have that for welfare benefits, because a lot of people obviously get into a situation where they rely on welfare benefits. It's just not enough. And so you're deciding whether you're going to pay for heating or eating. And this sort of scenario is so many families. So one, we could increase the welfare benefits. Two, we could have a real living wage. Affordable housing, which can be achieved. Obviously, we need to build more houses for social rent, and we need to abolish council tax. Certainly for renters, but we can abolish that if we increased it, if we changed it, as we said before, to a land value tax, which means the more expensive properties would be paying more.
Well, the coalition is asking for two main things from the government, which can be done very, very quickly and can make a really big impact. One is stop the benefits freeze. They've had a benefits freeze for the last 8 years. And so you can just imagine, so as inflation goes up, but actually the benefits that you're getting are not going up. So every year people are becoming more and more poor. And the other thing that they're trying to say is actually when some of these families, particularly the working poor, when they run out of money at the end of the month, what will they do? They die, it's very difficult for them to get any kind of loans. So they end up going to loan sharks or very high interest places to get money. And that is a spiral. So the more money they have to then borrow, it's a spiral. They go more and more into debt. And so therefore become they poorer and poorer. So what the coalition is asking for is that the government help them to get interest-free credit so that actually they can keep their head above the water, basically. And if they did that, at least it would go some way to actually giving these people some relief.
Once again, we know what could be done. The answer that the money is not there is not an answer, because the money is there. It's in the hands of the wrong people.
Because I think if we don't deal with this, we're very much in danger of having a whole generation of young people, the next generation, which
we've already got
are going to be so deprived, which is going to have an impact on us as a country, both socially and also economically. Because those young people who are living in poverty actually then have an impact on their education. They don't achieve the same grades as the people who are not living in poverty. And so
I think as one of the richest countries in the world, I think we can't afford to sort of sit on our laurels at all on this.
I think it's a disgrace. I think, particularly with child poverty, this should not be happening.
And as we know, the UN Special Rapporteur, Philip Alston, who gave a damning report, I think.
Who Philip Hammond he discredited that report, apparently. He didn't believe the figures that came out of the report.
In some ways, it doesn't matter the figures. The situation is bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether it's 14 million people in poverty or 10 million, I mean, it's actually 14 million, but how do you define poverty? It's bad.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
No, this is about children. This is
and
just
particularly
purely
children, because it's a bad
4.1
start.
million is the children, is what they're saying.
So, it's the start in life, isn't it? And so many people, something is
And
children.
the thing is, you don't need a report to tell us. You only have to walk down Haringey or, downtown Manchester to see that poverty exists. And why are the politicians not doing that? Manchester have got the highest levels of homeless people. It's who's the mayor of Manchester?
Andy Burnham
Andy
is the mayor
Burnham.
of Greater Manchester.
For Greater Manchester.
But the leader of Manchester City Council is who was actually interviewed on the Real Agenda the other day.
Yeah.
We talked about it.
Andy Burnham has said that this is a national emergency. Their homelessness is a national emergency.
It is. We see rough sleepers, but a lot of us don't actually see poverty because we're not living in those areas. We're not mixing with people in that situation, because people really in poverty cannot afford to go out. They can't afford to do anything. It's unbelievable for many of us to do, and we don't see it every day. This is part of the problem we've got to get through, that it's a matter of urgency. It's ruining people's lives, and it gets me so frustrated when the government can act on these things and don't. It's obvious what needs to be done.
I think it might be a question of people being able to relate as well, and very, very few politicians have actually been in a position of being poor.
But if they take high office and they want to do politics, I find it so frustrating that actually they should be out there looking at the people, talking to the people, finding out what is really happening in the country. But what they do instead is they go out on a photo opportunity.
Well, we could talk about this for a long time, and so we've talked a lot on these programs about fixing it, and let's hope we can keep pushing. And one of the things is trying to get more compassion in politics, which our friends at the organisation Compassion in Politics are actually pushing to do, to get more MPs to sign up to actually believe in fixing these things. So let's finish on that now. Thank you very much for your contributions. So what do you think? Do email us at info@realagendaradio.org with your comments and ideas, because this is your show and we'd love to hear from you. So coming up soon on the Real Agenda, we'll be talking about inequality to Vanda, who's the Executive Director at the Equality Trust, which is set up by Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett, the authors of the definitive 2009 book, The Spirit Level. We will hear more about the great work the Trust is doing to bring about more equal and fair society. And then, of course, there's the Weekly Wake Up, which will be with you next week. So that's all soon on the Real Agenda, the podcast for political change.
Thanks for listening, and thank you for the 5 out of 5 rating. So please pass on the message to your friends and get them to listen if you can, and to take action. And if you'd like to contribute to the show, please do let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
And you can subscribe by sending us an email, and we'll add you to the mailing list so you get notified of each episode as soon as it's released. Or you can subscribe on your podcast provider.
Also, check out our website, realagendaradio.org. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
And a special thanks to our sponsors, Reverse Media Group, one of the fastest growing search and media companies. Find out why at reversemediagroup.com. One thing is certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as more courageous politicians prepared to do the right thing for people over party. It's urgent and it's up to us to make it happen. That's the Real Agenda. I'm Tom Burgess.
And I'm Satya Kartara.
I'm Hugh Clark.
And I'm Oliver Williams.
Thank you very much indeed for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.